All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 8 of Bullets, Barbells, and Barbecue. I'm your host, Brett Carter. Matt is here, as usual. And we have special guests, doctors, Mark and Claire Rathjen from Core Physical Therapy.
Hello.
Matt has done a lot of time there because he's hurt everything.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been there for a while for yearly maintenance. But
I've also been there for a while.
yeah, you're broken
Yes.
too.
Yes, you have.
Mark's the least broken person in this
I
group.
know.
Let's
Smart.
keep it that way, yeah.
So we're going to kind of start out with the importance of starting with mobility, just in general, and not just powerlifting, but any sport really. And what do you guys, simplistically, what do you think is the easiest mobility routine basics that anybody in any kind of strength sport? You think it's dynamic? You think it's static?
Don't be fat.
That's always
Well, I mean,
That helps.
because there's a lot of controversy over dynamic stretching versus static stretching before working out. Should you static stretch before you work out? And by static stretch, you guys want to explain static stretching for people?
Oh, okay. Well,
would you like
Dr.
to
Mark
go?
Rathjen, would you like to take that one
Sure.
and start that one?
A static stretch would be defined clearly as like a stretch that you would hold for 30 seconds or more, and you would not be moving, so it would be static. The research has showed us that actually is detrimental to force production for up to 45 minutes after you do it. And that's kind of some old research we did at the University of Nebraska back when I was there, and that's late 90s, early 2000s.
That
so
was some time ago.
yeah, it was some time ago, and I don't think that's really changed. So dynamic stretching before workouts is always going to be better most of the time. So
Now-
always most of the time.
Always most. So dynamic wise, like if you're squatting, like body weight squats, do you think with just a bar, light weights, or just
I mean, ultimately, the best mobility routine for you is going to be what primes you for what you're about to do. So, a mobility routine for a sprinter or someone who's going to go running is going to look a little different than a mobility routine for someone who, even in powerlifting, who, if you're going to squat that day or if you're going to bench that day, like the best mobility routine is going to prepare you for specifically what you're about to do. So I know Mark and I joke about this all the time, but it's funny because it's true. But, back in the day, my warm-up was, okay, well, let's put some weight on the bar and squat, and we'll just go light, and we'll go
Right.
heavier and heavier and
We'll
heavier.
just start moving. It'll figure
Yeah,
itself
yeah,
out.
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. And now, I'm body weight squatting before I even think about
I
putting
got
the
to
bar on
stretch
my
to get out of
back.
bed. I'm like, oh, fuck, everything.
Exactly. Make
Matt,
some noise now to get up off the ground. And even, mobility things that you do on the ground, you got to think that out because you got to get back up.
Yes, you do.
so now? And what do you think of that? Like, we talk about like the so-rights, the AccuMobility balls, the cross balls, things like that before training. You recommend good, bad, ugly?
I mean, I think if there's an element of a dynamic motion, they're fantastic before training, and they're probably better statically after training, so you can actually get more motion. Static stretching usually is better for increasing long-term motion, but static stretching does not do well with physical performance. You would never static stretch before you were going to sprint. If you see a track warm-up, they're very dynamic. Sprinters warm up dynamically, and that's pretty normal. So we want to keep it like that. I mean, powerlifting and most athletics involve dynamic motion, so we should stretch that way. And then obviously sport-specific stretching mobility programs are going to be the most important. Would you agree with that, Claire?
Yes. I think there's a time and a place for a lot of those tools. Like, especially, I use the AccuMobility ball all the time. But at the same time, I think it was Kelly Starlett or the Supple Leopard or whatever his business is now.
Yeah, now he's changed the name to
Ready state.
Ready,
Yes,
the Ready
yeah.
State. Him and his wife now, I believe.
Yeah. And I mean, he was one of the first ones who really kind of started making it a little bit more mainstream.
Stream.
Thank you.
I gotcha.
Yeah. Woo. With like smashing and working through some soft tissue stuff. And so on one hand, I think a lot of those, the AccuMobility ball, foam rollers, right, they definitely have their place. But at the same time, do you have to go out and buy 12 different tools specifically to do something when you might have a foam roller and a barbell at home and you can do the majority of those things? I think the biggest thing that I tell people when anybody asks, because we get asked that question quite a bit, is there's there's a definite benefit to doing it, but you also have to know why you're doing it. And a lot of times people think, oh, I bought this Theragun because I'm going to break up scar tissue. Percussion therapy, whether you buy a $15 one off of Amazon or you buy a Theragun brand name, percussion therapy helps to increase blood flow to a muscle. It can increase blood flow to a tendon or a ligament, but you're not breaking up scar tissue necessarily with it, which is, I think, where the disconnect is with the general public.
Yeah, the amount of force it would take to break scar tissue would have to damage the tissue, and damaging tissue with percussion therapy probably is not going to happen. You need something fairly industrial and a masochistic sense of self to even implement such a thing.
Yeah. I think a lot of the tools, like the So-Right, is that the one that's like the U shape that you kind of lay on? Like, there's some things like that, and some of the stuff that I think Kelly Starrett first hit on is just shit that we all suck at because like we're so sedentary now and we sit, and so like you could go in anywhere and they're like, oh yeah, you're a little tight in here, huh? Oh, do this, and they're like, oh my god, this is fucking amazing. And so there's some of that stuff is like super popular just because it works because we all suck at it.
Right.
I mean, I've had clients, you wouldn't believe just having like bend over and touch your toe stretch
Dude,
for like
never.
30 seconds. And they're like, oh my God, that was like so great. I was like, this is like the oldest fucking stretch you can do.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
back
this
from
is the oldest thing in
Just
history.
get the gold
High.
star
Right.
in 5th grade, right?
Yeah, the old fucking sit and reach.
Well,
the
yeah.
presidential award.
Dude, I always came in second for that shit because, like, surprisingly enough,
'Cause you're
I was
fat?
like- yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yeah?
and I'm not mobile.
Well-
but like, you had the little box, right? And you had to like, you put your toes in the box. And you
Yeah,
lean
then you had to
forward,
slide the
Just
thing
it
forward.
I
forward,
couldn't
yeah.
fucking even touch the box. I was like,
Matt, where do you think your mobility went wrong when you walked across your yard and blew both your patella tendons out?
it started when I was born. Yeah.
Have you actually been diagnosed with your
curled up.
genetic defect?
Unofficially. I mean, WebMD is just like, I'm just fucked. No, but like looking back on like all the little injuries and stuff I've had, I had my first kind of real surgery, I think my freshman year of high school. They did a lateral release on my right knee. And at that point, the doc I saw was like, oh, like you're going to need total knee replacements by the time like you're 35.
Holy shit.
And like you're going to need that. And like you're probably never going to play like real sports and compete because like your knees are just shit. And
So you
trash
like
and,
lettered
that's-
in injuries in high school?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
You got a jacket for that?
I think so.
I should. Oh man,
You had
But,
so
like,
many casts that
looking-
people
looking
signed.
back now and having talked to a lot of people and experienced a lot of the unfortunateness, like really a lot of my symptoms and my patellar pain and like the tendon pain that I had like wasn't because like my knees were bad. I just couldn't move. Like I was so rigid and so unbendy, but I was generally like farm strong and just like tough, so I could just compensate with the lack
power
of
through.
mobility
Yeah, power through it,
with
yeah.
strength, and which is something like come around full circle. So now that I haven't been like actively training for powerlifting for probably a couple years now, like a lot of the stuff that didn't bother me, that was like a little small nag in the past, now is just like really fucking bothered me a lot because I don't have the strength that I used to like kind of keep everything held together and just push through it. So now all that lack of mobility is like catching up because I'm not strong enough to just force myself into positions and do stuff.
Yeah.
I feel that's like I just feel worse not working out.
Oh, totally.
Like if
man.
I don't work out for like a week, I feel fucking worse.
Yeah.
And then when you have that one good day, you think you're going to die because nothing hurts.
Yeah.
It's that one good day, you're like, oh,
this is
felt
fucking
great
great.
Yep, my last day on earth.
Body just dumping all the endorphins. Like you're done, buddy.
this is it.
Goodbye.
Nice.
What do you think what do you two, Mark and Claire, think is the best as far as like we talked about the scar tissue stuff, breaking up like the body tampering stuff like Donnie Thompson did. There's some people like that. Dry needling. I mean, do you consider that breaking up scar tissue or Graston?
Matt, do you have something to say?
Dry needling and vicious, violent Graston.
But now is dry needling considered breaking up scar tissue though? Or is that
No,
like a deep
not-
muscle
I
belly
don't
activation
think-
kind of?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not technically, you're not breaking scar tissue, you're releasing the muscle.
Yeah.
But the Graston itself, if you're pushing hard enough to really damage the tissue, you remodel that tissue.
Like I would go like so. I like after I blew my quads, I had a really really conservative rehab protocol afterwards.
Is that when the lady told you had a cute butthole?
Yes.
Okay. That's
Yes. Well, that was like real post. I had 2 nurses confirm that I had a cute butthole as they put a
at
suppository
the
up there.
sniff.
So
At the sniff.
yeah. Yeah.
Well,
What is that?
I suppose it's better than
What
her
does that
saying like,
actually
"Ooh,
mean?
boy,
Yeah, but
you
what's
got a
like,
rough one."
yeah, what's an ugly butthole look like?
I don't know.
I've only seen a handful of them. I haven't seen mine.
You didn't check it out after that? Like, hey, can you grab me a pic?
Dude, you look at your own butthole. I'll give you a mirror. You just try to take
Hey,
a look.
if
I got a
told me-
hand mirror back there.
If
We
somebody
can
told me
give
it was
you a
cute,
minute
I would
to-
probably be like, okay.
You might need a couple
Well, I mean,
mirrors.
so
I don't know.
so put it in perspective. Like after I tore my quads, I went to like essentially a nursing home.
Skilled, like a swing better
Yeah,
rehab facility.
so it was like, but it was on like the acute rehab side. So there was like the popcorn ice cream station in the center, and then we had like the people who were recovering from surgery over here, and then like the people who were never going to leave on the other side, and like we'd meet in the middle and talk over ice cream.
I'm
and
sure
they
loved you.
I guarantee
You're gonna
they
die
loved you.
here.
Dude,
I'm leaving.
So I'm in there. So I'm hanging out in there, and I was there for 2 weeks. After the first like 2 or 3 days, like the elders would come by and they would like poke their head in the room, like, we heard there's a youngin' in here. I'm like, that's me.
The
And they're
frisky old
like,
ladies?
"Fresh Yeah, and they're like,
meat."
what happened? I'm like, don't touch. Nah, it didn't happen, unfortunately. But so they would come by, and then I had like this group of old guys that would come by and pick me up for breakfast and like put me in a wheelchair because I had like
adorable.
both my legs were locked out straight, and so I'd put me in this wheelchair and they'd wheel me down to breakfast and we'd eat and they'd take me back to my room. Where are we going? Oh yeah, the butthole part. So yeah, I'd
Yeah.
been there. So I had
Scratches
surgery
your
on like a
butthole.
Friday, and I don't know, for people who haven't had a lot of pain meds post surgery, like that shit will block you up.
Yeah, you don't
better,
poop.
Yeah.
better than anything. So come around. So this is surgery's Friday. I'm in the acute rehab place Monday morning. It's like Wednesday afternoon, and the nurse came in. Desiree, I think was her name, and of course all the nurses.
her name
there
was
are-
Desiree.
All the nurses there are like 20, and they're young and spunky, and I'm like just sweating out, just fatness and stink. I haven't showered in like a week. And so they're in here, and she comes in, and she's like, hey, so have you had any bowel movements? And I was like, I farted. She was like, that doesn't count, Matt. And she was like, my shift ends at 3. Like, if nothing happens by 1, we're going to make something happen. And so I'm like, all right. So we're sitting there, like, the day goes on, nothing happens. So she comes in at like 1, and she's like, anything? And I was like, I farted twice. She's like, still doesn't count, Matt.
Moving on up.
Yep.
Oh.
And so she comes back like a 2:45, and it's her and then the shift nurse who's going to change with her, who's also probably young 20s. And they come over, like, hey, this is so-and-so. She's going to relieve me when I'm done, but, like, something has to happen here shortly. So I'm like, all right. So they give me the oral laxative. Nothing, just some tummy bubbles and farts. Give me another oral laxative. Nothing happens again. And she's like, you know what time it is? And I was like, yep.
Did you ask for a finger or did you ask for a suppository?
What?
Just for fingers or
Well,
suppository?
they came in with the snake first. They brought out the plumbing snake on the end of a drill. And I was
Oh.
like, ooh, let's not go there yet.
Yeah, I'm not ready. I'm new to this.
So, yeah. So, again, I'm in, my legs are locked out straight, so I can't really do anything. So, you're awkwardly on your side. And I was like, swing your leg over top. So, I swing my leg over top. And I feel her grab my butt cheek and spread it open to get the full view. And she's like, wow. And I'm like, oh.
And this is a dirty butthole she said was cute.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, probably not because I haven't pooped in like a week.
Yeah, but it's
So
still
it
It's
was
stale,
probably-
yeah.
It's
I mean,
still-
I bet it was just like a swampy,
just
hot
a
mess.
balloon knot down there.
Yeah, like the olfactory nerves were fucked, but I bet it looked pretty. And so she lifts my butt cheeks and she's like, wow. And I'm like, uh-oh. She's like, you have a really cute butthole. And my first thought was like, thank you. And the second thought was like, that's fucking weird.
Well, I mean,
Third, her name's Desiree.
Super
Right.
weird.
But in context, there's probably just looking at like 80-year-old buttholes all the time because they're in this
Yeah.
nursing home. So anyway, so she comes in, gives me the up there, and then she comes back with the other nurse, and she like specifically asks, she's like, can whatever her name look at your
also
butthole?
see your butthole.
And I was like, I feel like I should be getting paid, but yes, that's fine. And so she's like, wow, it is a cute butthole. I was like,
Well, I don't know what that means.
right. I'm like, I don't have a lot of context aside Pornhub, and that's like stage. So once my cute butthole gets fingered and I get suppository up there, they leave, and like as soon as they leave and go around the corner, it's like, I'm like, So I let out one tenth
Test.
of a fart, and I'm like, this is done. And I'm like, try to move to get out of bed. Nope, I'm a shit. Oh, fuck. So I hit the button, and then it's getting worse and worse. So I'm like mashing the nurse button. They come in like, can I help you? And I'm like, it's go time. She's like, okay. So they bring in the old commode, in the old plastic chair with the poop bucket underneath, right? And so they bring that down, they set it, and they stand me up, and they're like, are you good? I'm like, yeah, I got it. I got this shit. And so I'm like trying to get my pants down and get myself positioned, but of course my legs are super swollen, hips are swollen, and I've got these fucking knee braces on, so I can't get it like past like half thigh. And so I'm like, fuck. So I hit the button again. They come back and like, everything okay? I'm like, no, I can't get this down. Can you help me? She goes, oh yeah, okay. And so they help me get my pants down. And so I'm sitting on the commode, and they got to throw my legs up on a chair in front of me, so they're out in front. And now,
How does the wiener tuck go on that to pee? So you just don't pee
so
everywhere.
most of the time, if you're gonna poop, for those of you that are boys, you would put the pee-pee down, right? But
Yeah, I was gonna say, but you got no room for that.
But post-surgery, you're pretty swollen down there, and so there's no room for the wiener to go down. So it's just looking at me, So now the real challenge is I'm like,
no.
can you take a shit without peeing?
Being on yourself.
No.
No.
So I'm like, all right, gonna poop, pee a little. Fuck. So I'm trying to like relax and stuff. I'm like, all right, we got this. Poop a little, pee. Fuck. And so I hit the button again. Like, are you done? I'm like, no. Can you hand me that towel? And they're like, yeah, sure.
Oh,
So
he had a piss towel.
So they hand me this towel. Yeah, they hand me this towel. And I'm like, thank you. And they leave. And I just wad this towel up, put it in my lap, piss in a towel that's on my lap while I shit in a plastic bucket. Almost the highlight of my life at that point. And they come back in like, are you all done? And I'm like, yeah. And they go to reach for the towel. And I was like, I'd get gloves. And she goes, okay. So they get gloves, put it in a little bucket. And they're like, I can get myself. So I'm trying to like wipe myself. But of course, I'm not mobile to begin with and all this other stuff. So I can only get like 3/4 of my butthole. But I know the deep down crack is just covered in shit. So I hit the button again. And I'm like, oh, do you need help? Yeah, can you help me wipe back there? And they're like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And so, again, it's all like young 20-somethings in there. And at this point, they move the chair, and I have my walker in front of me. And I'm kind of like leaning on the walker, and they're doing this. And like, oh, can you bend over a little more so we can get in there? Fuck yeah, you can. So I crossed my hands over the walker, like put my head down, just butthole to the stars, and got my butt wiped.
And that cute butthole all of a sudden now looked like
It's
like Hiroshima.
It's probably on the internet somewhere. Your
Yeah.
cute butthole is making someone.
You went from
cash.
beautiful Japan to Hiroshima.
It just had to be like a prolapsed mushroom at that point because that shit was huge and it was like a rock.
Did you fill up the bowl?
bucket.
No, I mean it was like a couple pop cans size of just like rock hard shit.
Yeah,
That was
solid.
like, you heard it go
Oh.
dunk in the bottom of the can. And that wasn't the first time I had poop in a bucket,
No, that's a whole nother day.
or the
though.
last time.
Yeah, that's a whole nother day though.
So
so
dry
body-
needling.
Yeah, so
But- so
body
back
tampering.
To,
yeah.
so back to that. So after I went through all
Sometimes
that,
it spirals out. We never know what's going to happen here.
so post surgery, I was locked out straight for like 9 weeks, both legs. And so mobility getting back in there was just terrible. And the lady I went to was really good with mobility and kind of like bending me back into position, but like actually getting that shit to loosen up and be able to like fire and use it again was not really there. Like the functionality of my quads were just kind of shot at that point. And so then again, I went for probably 2 or 3 years of just being able to compensate with strength everywhere else. And then like I just started walking just regularly to get a little less chunky. And like immediately, like my tendons, my patella tendons, my quad tendons, just on fire because like nothing was really working there. So that's when I went and saw Mark, and he introduced me to needling. Which at first I'd heard about it, and like everyone was kind of like, meh, needling, and I was like, I don't know, fuck yeah, let's do it. So we did it for a while, and it was really great. And the combination of like the needling up front to kind of get everything warmed up and fired, and then the aggressive, violent Graston was fantastic. And I distinctly remember a point on, I think it was my right quad that it happened, but I had like these kind of golf ball knots on the outside that just wouldn't go away. And at one point, like he's stabbing, and then there's this super violent like contraction there, and it felt like someone just squeezed a sponge full of like sandy water, and it was like, and like it immediately started to bruise, and then the Graston afterwards, like that lump went away. Like it just kind of like worked itself out and smashed, but I had this big gnarly bruise of just probably 3-year-old blood that had just been sitting there.
You're really talking this up. You're like
It's
we're
like-
really convincing people all over
It's
too.
like-
Like,
well,
try dry needling.
Yeah, I would. Like needling, at least for me, has been like fantastic because like it's, and I don't know the exact science behind it, but like that contraction of like forcing it to squeeze down, it relaxes beyond a point that you could get it before, so that when you go in and start smashing on it, you're not smashing on this like contracted ball of shit. You kind of like loosen it up a little bit so you can actually get in there. Because I had Grassland on it, I rolled on it. I used that. We have that 170-pound steel roll out here that I would just roll
the body
across it, and it
tampering
would like
stuff.
doop, doop, bloop, over top that bump, and it just never got rid of it.
So for people who don't know,
Let's get the
guess,
science on
yeah,
these things
let's talk
here.
about this. So there's a big talk in probably just the medical community, but physical therapy in general, that do trigger points exist? Can you do anything? Is dry needling worth it? And I think the majority of the research points to it doesn't matter what you want to call it. It doesn't matter if you want to call it a muscle knot, you want to call it a trigger point, or if you don't think that they exist. But dry needling is typically used to basically elicit a twitch response on a group of muscle fibers that are basically hyperactive. We're not talking about necessarily tightness, we're talking about tension. So instead of a muscle being at full rest, there's some element of tension there. And yes, things from the surface, Graston or IASTM, foam rolling, even, percussion therapy, things like that, are always limited based off of what you can do from the surface. We're obviously not going to damage skin in order to do something a quarter of an inch from the surface, and that's where dry needling comes in.
Yeah, somebody the size of Matt doesn't benefit from surface work like a regular person would. Dry needling is going to go 4 or 5 inches deep, and you're just never going to get that from the surface. You can't Graston 5 inches down. You're not going to be able to smash it 5 inches down. It's just not going to happen. So
5 inches is all you got.
okay, 4.5.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that was like, at least again for me, I had never had needling, but now it also seems that needling has expanded. Like I think, again, I saw a number of different PTs and places and stuff before I found you guys, and people knew about needling, but it was kind of like, to me, it seemed like people kind of looked at it, not quite acupuncture, but like something.
Yeah, kind of in that same vein.
To that same vein and stuff. But now I think that it has really opened up a lot, and people are a lot more open to it, and there's more resources, and people are aware of it, and they're like, oh, this is really awesome in conjunction with XYZ for these scenarios, and people are a little more open to it, especially in like the Omaha area.
I mean, we even have orthopedic surgeons who will specifically put it on their scripts now.
That's awesome.
Before it was kind of always something like, oh, we're doing this. They're like, okay, cool. Like, thanks for treating our patients and doing whatever you need to. But now we'll actually have a handful of orthopedic surgeons who will say, hey, I think this patient could definitely benefit this. And it obviously helps, more exposure to it. You don't have to talk people into it as much to say, like, no, this is not some sort of snake oil thing. Like, this is a legit thing that has some treatment base on it and has some research behind it, and we're learning more and more about it. But I think especially in the athletic realm, and I will tell my athletes this all the time, is that the stronger you are, obviously strength is never a bad thing, but the stronger you are, you have to think about if there's not the mobility with it, like how much that strong muscle can have a play globally. And I will often tell people, some of the injuries that we see with athletes, my mom, bless her heart, my mom's not getting these injuries because she's just not strong enough to, And so somebody who's a lifter or a sprinter or somebody who has a decent amount of muscle mass, you have to kind of think differently in how you're approaching some of the mobility issues, because a strong muscle that's tight is wildly different than a muscle that's not very strong that's tight.
Yeah, correct. If you're working on a power lifter versus a marathon runner, that's a completely different amount of tension in that muscle system. So the way you approach it, and obviously the goals after and during rehab are totally different too. So it really is, patient specific and sport specific.
So you would say needling is more trigger point, however, in quotes, more than you would say, like we talk about, like the body tampering with the smashing, the foam rolling, just more pinpoint than anything. And then we're in Graston. You can explain Graston a little more. It's more of a surface area. But if you guys want to explain kind of what Graston is and like what tool, like kind of the tool setup, because I don't think people.
No, I think Graston though is like the name brand.
Right.
That's like
So
Band-Aid or Kleenex.
Like,
Exactly.
there's no like a
Yeah.
gua sha.
Because I think people see like the tools, like even Amazon will advertise the tools, but I don't think everybody really knows what it is. And I think doing Graston on yourself for most people is probably, they're too much of a pussy to really do it.
Correct.
That's probably correct, yeah.
So
So Graston is a brand name of something that we call IA-STIM, so Instrument Assisted Soft Tissue Mobilization. So, and that kind of leaves the door wide open. And people who are against it, people who don't do a ton of manual therapy, which are also, side note, probably people who don't work with athletes very much.
Correct.
They'll liken it to a butter knife. I mean, I suppose if
she called us athletes.
in a pinch.
Cheers.
Cheers. I suppose in a pinch, but I have talked to countless people in the sports realm when you're talking about the medical community, and orthopedic surgeons and athletic trainers and strength and conditioning coaches and PTs who work specifically with the athletic population, and they're all fans of it. And so I think if you're going to liken it to something like, oh, it's a butter knife, are some of the tools overpriced? Yeah, absolutely. And those are the brand name ones, but there's a great value in it.
Absolutely. I use a lot of analogies when I explain things to patients, and I kind of explain normally with dry needling, you're basically filling the pothole, and Graston is you're smoothing it out. If you try to smooth out a pothole before it's filled, then you're not going to be very effective. So primarily, almost exclusively, I will dry needle somebody first to get everything to a baseline resting position, and then the Graston can break up all the underlying tissue and smooth everything out. If you do it in reverse order, if you're Grastoning over a really deep trigger point, you're really not going to do a whole lot of good with it.
So like Omaha Street Cruise.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, they use hot patches, and they just kind of come out like 3 days later. I'm not sure they're super effective, but
yeah. They're doing the opposite of what you're saying.
yeah, yeah.
And now, and the other big thing, because I think talking about some of this stuff, because I think a lot of people, I don't want to say it's trendy, but it's kind of a newer thing. You know what I mean? You see a lot of people with like kinesio tape or K tape, or I'm sure there's like 100 different brands.
Yeah.
And I don't
What's
think people
that?
always know what it is.
What is it?
I know
Yeah,
Amber
like
tried
the
it one time, but
kinesio.
she's like allergic to the world. So
she's allergic to everything.
yeah.
So this is interesting, actually. And Mark and I took we just had to take a CEU course, and it was close by, and it fit in our schedule. But
and rock tape, that's the brand. You took a rock
Yeah,
tape one,
yep.
right?
Yeah.
and it's interesting how in the beginning, when it first really got popular, what are the Summer Olympics with the
volleyball
players,
team,
yeah,
yeah.
the beach
Probably
volleyball
the
players.
late 2000s, I would imagine. People were putting it on everything.
Yeah.
Basically.
And initially, when it came out, kinesio tape or KT tape, then they were saying, oh, you apply it this way to activate a muscle, and then you have to apply it this way and put the stretch this way to kind of like down-regulate the muscle. When we took this rock tape course, they basically said, hey, there's been a ton of research lately. And what it's basically showing is that, without getting too technical, it basically is putting a flashlight on an area of your body for your brain to say, hey, you need to pay attention to this. So it's a non-noxious stimuli. So it's a novel stimulus that your body is paying attention to. I use this analogy as well, is that when you first put your foot in a shoe, you're like super aware that your foot is in a shoe. And now that I've said that, you guys are probably all sitting there thinking like, yeah, my foot's in a shoe. I can feel that shoe. But your body chooses to pay attention to that information when it's new, and then it chooses to completely ignore it when it's not new anymore, because your body perceives it as something that's not a threat. It's no longer a novel
It's
stimulus.
normal.
It's normal. Well, with kinesio tape, or honestly any brand of tape, your body's now paying attention to that area. And that's basically as deep as it gets.
Yeah.
So it's just like is it like a placebo effect then? That's all it really is?
It's not necessarily a placebo effect. It's
It's like
gets
putting
down
like
to,
tape on a cat's foot.
No, that's way
quite-
more.
yeah,
That's way more fun.
way,
Way
more
interesting.
entertaining.
Yeah.
So you're more like, if you have a position that you maybe like whatever, like your shoulder is just moving in an odd pattern, or you just have some muscular dysfunction there, you're going to tape it in a certain position to like, hey brain, pay attention to how this feels and moves.
Yes.
And then your body
Yes.
may adjust.
So
to
is the
like,
tape kind of taking the place of the muscle movement then?
It basically, so shoulder's a great example. If somebody has a protracted shoulder, a really forward shoulder, or they're getting a little bit too much upper trap and they're kind of elevating their shoulder, you can apply KT tape on the backside that basically kind of gives them that feedback that, oh, okay, I'm supposed to hold my shoulder back, kind of a little bit better posture. But if I get out of that, then as that shoulder is coming forward, that's when you feel that stimulus of, oh, hey, there's something on my
Okay.
skin. There's something that's stretching. I'm not supposed to be in that position. And there's a little bit more science. I probably summarized it a little too easily, but
we don't
there
have a very
are,
smart audience.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So it's not
there's
really
definitely an area of like of biofeedback, basically, is that your body's paying attention to nerve stimuli, and it gets as deep as like, what are your hair follicles paying attention to, and all of those things, your mechanoreceptors and things like that. Yeah, I am smart.
wow, good
All of those
triple
things
word score.
are giving information back to your brain, and that's where it kind of gets to. It's basically kind of helping to establish the regulation of that area on your body.
So it's not trying to emulate like a muscle movement, like say it's
No,
Okay.
but that is how we learned about it initially. Is when it first came out. They're like, oh, you can activate a muscle by doing this, and we now know through research that's not at all how it works.
But to your point, like if you have the shoulder that's like rotated forward and you're trying to get it back, the tape isn't going to be the replacement for like fixing that position.
Correct. You're
or
not
like
going to hold.
PT or
Yeah,
something
and
like
even
that.
athletic tape, I think
it's
that-
literally just a band-aid.
correct. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's why it
essentially.
comes
But like
in cool
in the moment,
colors.
in the moment though, it's going to help you. Like if you're going out, like you're going to play like volleyball or something like that, in that moment, for whatever duration you have it on, you're a little more aware of that, and you can
Exactly.
like
Yep.
proactively address it. But post activity, you're going to need to do something in the interim to fix that underlying
Correct.
condition.
Yes,
Yep.
it doesn't really fix your problem. It just brings awareness to it, and it almost operates subconsciously. If you're in a protracted position, and when you do that, you have tape on and it's pulling on it, and it feels kind of either uncomfortable or tension, you're going to automatically subconsciously pull it back out of that irritation. That's
Yeah.
just what your brain will do. It doesn't like to be uncomfortable.
And the majority of the research, this is like super old research, but they talk about even athletic tape, so the non-elastic, not stretchy, like old school tape, you lose the effectiveness of it after about 15 minutes because it does stretch out slowly over time. So even something like an ankle tape, we look at basketball players who want their ankles taped or football players who want their ankles taped every single practice and every game. You're getting about 12 to 15 minutes, I believe, is what the time frame is. And then after that, it's complete proprioception. So basically just awareness of what your body position is, the position of a joint, what's your, especially for ankle, like what's your foot doing in relationship to the rest of your body, things like that.
Would that seems like that might lead to additional injuries because like you have this false sense of security, like you have this ankle cast on.
There's definitely that thought that, with continued taping or even bracing, honestly, is that are you taking away the natural adaptations that your body should be making in order to do? There's a time and a place for it, obviously, especially coming back from injury. But
I think that's the problem with bracing in general. If you're bracing permanently for an issue, you're either going to give a false sense of security or you're going to have that brace take over for the natural accessory muscles that are supposed to be doing that accessory motion or stabilization. And so long term, it's not a great situation. Short term, it may be great, but...
Well, even in the orthopedic realm, which I won't speak for orthopedic surgeons in general, but in the beginning of my career, many moons ago, we always braced post-op. And then it kind of shifted from those custom-made, like ACL braces where you had to have the vendor come in and measure you, and you got to pick your material and colors and all of that. And then it shifted a little bit a couple of years ago to like just an over-the-counter, hey, let's give some lateral support to a knee. And now I very rarely see bracing, not necessarily even return to sport, but I don't see bracing a lot like immediately post-op because I think every major like medical function is looking at mobility saying, well, this is probably more important,
Yeah, in the old days, they used to brace you for 4 months after an ACL, and you couldn't move. And that was a career ender for those people.
And that's the ACL in particular has changed
Completely.
a lot even in
Yes.
the last 10 years. So my wife's an orthopedic PA out here, and they do a ton of ACL stuff. And she doesn't do a lot of ACL directly, but she helped out one of the surgeons, I don't know, several months ago about it. And she was going to write the script and like filling out the post-ops and stuff. Was like, hey, where's the brace? There's no brace in here. Talk to the PA that normally works on that stuff. I'm like, oh no, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
She's like, hold on,
Yeah.
you don't? And they're like, no, it's just don't be stupid.
Yep.
And like,
And even the orthos that do brace, I mean, they're basically doing it because they say, well, I just want my patients to feel comfortable. I want them to be able to
Fair.
get up, go to the bathroom, move around, that sort of thing. And there's definitely that element. We'll see people post-op that are just terrified to move, and I'm like, no, it's weird. You got to trust me. You're gonna feel a ton better once we start moving. And I would say 99% of people are like, oh my gosh.
Do you run into that a lot with people post-op who are like afraid to utilize whatever was fixed?
For sure, especially when they're getting into, like, an ACL is classically a hyperextension injury. So getting them to extend and put weight on it is very difficult for them because that's usually where they were injured, in that position. And so your body basically subconsciously is like, I don't want to go there again. Nope, not going there. So you have to override that.
Yeah, the technical term is fear avoidance.
Yes.
And it's a learned fear avoidance. And so we basically, Mark and my job is to trick people into using those positions and
Just come up behind them and push them real quick.
and not, well, sometimes, but that's usually later
take a step.
rehab. That's
Take a
usually,
step.
yeah.
Did you guys have you ever read any of, Pavel is the big like kettlebell guy, the big Russian. Did you ever read his Relax into Stretch book where a lot of his theory is the only thing that inhibits your mobility is your nervous system and your ability to actually relax and let like the Golgi tendon organs stimulate to fucking look at that shit.
Oh,
But
was a
I did
big
not
word spelled out.
expect that word to come out of your mouth.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen with people too where you can actually relax and get further and further into it.
Yep.
I mean, do you think there's actual backing to that? I think so, but I mean,
yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's your nervous system holds back a lot because, like you said, well, I've been hurt in that position before. I don't want to.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't want to go there again.
Yeah.
But I've heard stories of a buddy of mine told me they were in high school and they were at early morning wrestling practice and they were like stretching out and they had the, sitting with legs apart trying to touch basically your chest to the floor. And one of the kids that was super tiny like fell asleep and just like woke up and he was like laying face down on the floor.
Yeah.
Just because his body will eventually get down
I
to
think
that
you
position.
can, but I think back to kind of what you guys said before, there's like flexibility, I think, as I've defined it myself, as like static stretching. Like you're holding a position and you're just trying to see your range of motion, where mobility is like flexibility in action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like to be able to have mobility, I don't know if that's as much like mental conditioning as much as it is like your body just like, I don't feel confident there.
Yeah, it's a whole probably neuromuscular issue, which is probably a good way to describe it. But, when we talk about, like we'll go back to a knee injury, is that sometimes surgeons will, I guess, scare people into saying, well, I don't want to have to do a manipulation, right? And now how many of those manipulations you get the patient under anesthesia, they're out, and the surgeon's like, oh, well,
Their
that
motion's
that
fine.
moves
Yeah.
full range of motion. But outside of it, they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. This
Oh, it
hurts. I'm
hurts a
doing
little bit.
damage.
Oh, it
Yeah,
hurts.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then
Duh.
they come out of the manipulation and they're like, oh, my knee bent all the way. Like my doctor broke up all that scar tissue. Well,
He charged
maybe.
you. He charged you for it though.
Yeah,
he
yeah,
did.
they did.
Yeah, he charged you to bend
Yeah.
your knee like a dummy.
Yeah.
Idiot. What's the worst injury you guys have rehabbed?
Oh, the worst. You probably got the cake for the worst athletic injury.
Oh, with my
Your
my
wrestler.
yeah, I had a very lovely young man that was wrestling, and his opponent kind of stepped backwards, hyperextended his knee, and he had a full, like not kneecap dislocation, a full like femur on tibia dislocation.
The guy that stepped back, or the kid that?
He got his opponent stepped back into him, and his knee
Oh.
hyperextended and ended up tearing every major ligament in his knee: ACL, PCL, LCL, MCL.
How old?
Yeah,
Was
probably
he
15 at the
15 at
time.
the
Oh, that
yeah.
sucks. That sucks.
He's bendy.
Yeah.
Including there was
Obviously not that bendy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Including
and then
nerve
damage and vascular damage. Yeah.
That's kind of like Zach Miller that played for the Bears, where he had that and he
Yeah.
stepped in his whole knee,
Yes.
and then
Correct.
he almost
Yep.
lost his leg because it was bleeding out.
Yes,
and the nerves.
exactly.
Same
People
injury, yes.
people don't realize when you say that's a not only potentially career-ending injury, but a potentially life-ending injury.
Or a leg-ending injury.
Or,
Yeah.
or limb
Yeah.
injury, yeah.
And his, I know
absolutely.
his is still bothers him when he stands for long periods of time.
Yeah. But the neurosurgeon and the orthopedic surgeon, just top notch. He does have a little bit of nerve damage that I think once he gets out of high school is probably going to have a second surgery to repair. But he did phenomenal. Now that's a multi-stage surgery, right?
And,
Like,
a young kid, the bounce
Yeah.
back.
Lenny's a
gonna
wrestler. Like wrestlers are just like mentally disturbed anyway, and they're tough as fuck.
Yeah. But I mean,
Also,
it was
yeah.
Also true.
it was a good 2 years of his life spent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a nerve graft procedure, then there was
Holy
a
shit.
rehab.
Dude,
and
I
then there was
bet
a-
he pulled so many chicks with that sympathy card in school. Just crutching everywhere. Oh, do you want me to carry your books?
Oh, you got to be on top. My leg
Oh,
doesn't work.
yeah.
Maybe.
Woe is me.
I didn't ask, but you know.
What do you think the next like big trend is going to be? I mean, the trends are really changing. I mean, even in the medical field. I mean, we all know that. Like,
Ooh, that's a tough one.
that's
they
a good
they go
question.
very quickly because we had kinesio tape, obviously. We've had.
oh, I got a question. Okay, so we're talking about kinesio tape, right? It's just kind of like a mental thing.
Yep.
Now we talked about the U.S. women's volleyball player had that.
Uh-huh.
So, but do you think like a high speed movement like that, the tape really does anything? Right? You know what I mean? Because she's playing while she's playing.
Physically, I would say it does nothing, but mentally, it does a lot because it's the awareness factor. But actually, structurally, is it changing the joint position? Absolutely not.
I mean, going back to like mechanoreceptors and things like that, like there's probably a little bit of upregulation in terms of maybe a little bit of increased muscular activity. You get a little bit of more dynamic stability in terms of, you know, neuromuscular control. But I don't think with a high speed, high velocity movement like an overhead volleyball swing.
I wonder if it even does anything mental to her. You know what I mean? Like, because if it makes you consciously think about it, well, in that high speed of a game, you're not going to consciously think of any of
Well,
it.
think about all the downtime you have. in
I would
between.
super tape
Yeah.
the front so I could really snap forward and hit the ball harder.
Like, what was the movie with the kid who broke his arm and played for the Twins?
The rookie.
Yeah.
The rookie of the
Yeah,
year.
rookie.
Rookie of the year, whatever it was, yeah.
Right? Give me that.
Yeah, but yeah, if you super tape the front, get a high speed return on that.
I still it seems it's healed a little tight.
But yeah, sorry. So yeah, what do you think the next trend will be? You should invent it, whatever it
Oh
is.
gosh.
That's how you get rich. You just
mean,
come
I-
out with some scotch tape and put your name on
I
it.
feel like we're not that trendy. I don't know. Cupping was trendy for a short time. I mean, it's
What do you
still
think about
popular. I mean,
Just a blood flow thing.
It is. I think
it's attraction to the skin. It's a novel stimulation.
It feels good. People like it.
It looks
I
like an
also-
octopus attacked you.
Correct.
I also think that there's probably in with cupping and some, you know, static stretching and things like that. I think there's definitely the element of like, it feels good, so I relax. And I don't think there's harm in that, but it kind of goes back to that same idea is you have to know why you're doing something. And if you perceive benefit from it and there's no real risk, I mean, that's my big
Yeah.
litmus test there is that are you going to do harm by trying something? Same thing with biofreeze, right? Like, well, as long as your skin's not irritated with it, you're
So do you
probably
think-
fine.
Like they have cryo and some of these other things, and everybody's doing the new trend, I guess, is right the cold plunge.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's probably the
If-
newest
that's-
trend.
I mean, if
Those things
taking
are-
hot
those things are
showers
fucking
makes
expensive.
Me weak,
They
then
are.
I am weak.
Right. The
Happily.
cold, like I will say, so I've done like cold showers for better part of 3 years now.
I can't do it.
No.
To
Major
me,
pussy.
like I'm going to build a cold tub this summer to try it out and just see if there's any kind of like.
You're not going to buy
physiological
like that
improvement.
$10,000 cold plunge tub or whatever that is,
If I had $10,000 to discretionally just spend on a tub, I would.
or just buy a freezer.
I might get a freezer. So my concern is like,
I've seen people use a freezer. They just use a big freezer and they fill it
can.
up.
And I was at Lowe's and I started climbing in them.
Good
and
luck.
They got all fucking
Can you
weird
fit into them?
Fucking air might shut the lid and kill you. Fucking lock you in
So I
there.
thought about one of like the ice barrels, and then I
Oh.
started looking at the measurements, and so I'm just like trying to measure. I'm like, I don't think
I
this
can't
is
get
gonna
in there.
work."
And then you got to like stay like squatted down. Who the fuck?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to do work while I'm
Right.
in there.
So, but like from a cold shower standpoint, like if the cold shower is part of your daily routine, and this has nothing probably to do with PT or rehab, but like cold shower first thing in the morning, part of your daily routine, or a cold soak is more of like a mental acuteness thing because like it's something that you 100% don't want to do. There's like probably 7 people in the world who enjoy like getting in ice cold water.
Yeah.
But you do that first thing in the morning and your body kind of hops into this semi like fight or flight. It's like, oh fuck, we are freezing. We need to do something about this. Plus you overcome something first thing in the morning, right? Like you don't want to do it and you're like, fuck, all right. You get in there. It was really like mentally challenging to force yourself in there. You do it, you get out and you're like, oh, hey, I didn't die. I peed a little, but I didn't die. This is great. And so then you go on and you can do other stuff and like it just kind of from that
Just kind of
standpoint.
sets your mentality for the day.
Yeah, so I think at least for me, from a mental standpoint, that for sure. But I do want to try the actual cold soak, for like the 3 to 5 minutes.
So you guys aren't getting a cold plunge for the clinic, is what you're saying?
No.
I mean, I suppose we could get a pool and write it as a text, right?
Gross.
Yeah.
Public anything that involves water
Yeah.
or heat is disgusting.
I'm sure there's benefits, like you said, the mental toughness element of it, and I know that anecdotally people have talked about like eczema goes away and their like skin condition is better and things like that. And
Maybe
I'm
it's because they
sure-
never shower.
Well, maybe.
Right.
And I think to your point, Matt, is like the breathing aspect of it, of trying to control, like, hey,
Yeah.
it's fight or flight. I'm trying to control what I can control in a situation that I'm not in control of. I think there's probably benefit in that for sure. I'm not that strong-minded of a person.
Yeah, I think the breathing
I believe
aspect
that.
is a
Yeah.
huge component, actually.
know.
I mean, I don't really do it in the wintertime, but when it's warmer, like in the summertime, I've done it before. The breathing through a noxious stimulation like a cold shower is actually very beneficial. But
I mean,
do
our,
you want
our
to be
water heater
cold?
went out.
Yeah. Do you want to be cold?
was
You know,
not
at
okay.
5 o'clock in the morning. I don't
Yeah.
know. You got to be in the right mindset for it. I think it is a good mental stimulation for the
Yeah.
right amount of people.
All right. That's kind of.
Yeah,
I think that's.
I'm curious to
newest
see
trend.
the more research because there's some stuff about like now I know when they talk about it builds up like your brown fat stores and that's beneficial. I'm like sure maybe a little bit, but again like I think at least on my high level research there it's like you're probably predisposed genetically like how much of that you're going to have and how you're going to react. Now there's probably some good stuff to like forcing yourself to like that mental challenge and there's probably some physical response of like being physically adapt. I know like we live in a pretty comfortable society where like it's always 70 degrees pretty much anywhere we go. So like physically, if we force ourselves to have these temperature swings, like if you do a cold plunge and then you go in a sauna for like 20, 30 minutes, like your body's now physically adapting and changing. Like, holy
Yeah.
shit, like we have to be ready. We have to be able to thermoregulate and control our systems a little bit better. So I'm sure some of that research like
She's
is legit
okay.
on that.
She's
but that's,
okay.
I would say that's the one thing I'm curious to see like how this comes out, especially Dr. Rhonda Patrick, I think's her name. She's huge on sauna and the benefits of sauna, like 15 to 20 minutes at like 160 degrees or something for 3 or 5 days a week, something like that, can improve all-cause mortality. Like when you take everything else into account, like if you do sauna X amount of days a week for this temperature at this time, all-cause mortality improves just kind of across the board. I don't know how much research there is behind that or kind of where she's getting her thing from. But I think, at least for me, those are kind of the two things that I'm curious to see, like longevity-wise. I don't think athletic-wise you're going to have this huge improvement, but just like having a better quality of life longer.
Yeah,
Curious
I
to see
mean,
where that leads.
you're taxing your cardiovascular system doing that, so that's going to give you a stimulation, much just like resistance training changes your muscular system. So I don't know why you wouldn't have the same carryover to some degree with a hot environment where your blood flow is in a hyper stated position.
I will butcher his name. I had to look it up. Dr. James DiNicolantonio?
Pina colada?
Yeah, we'll go with
Something
pina
like
colada. That sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, good luck with that one.
Yeah, Dr. James D. Also, like a huge fan of sauna exposure, and just talks about like regulation of like body functions that, like you said, to your point, we're always in this very comfortable environment. So cold exposure, heat exposure, like getting blood pressure regulation through changes of exposure of different temperatures, like that I think will probably have some research coming to it as well.
So I remember back in the day, I'd read some stuff where they talked about doing the contrast, the super hot, super cold, is it could have a negative effect on your heart because of the shock to your system, because you know what I mean. You're changing your blood flow so much.
I think some of that was around like being in a really cold shower for like 30 seconds or a minute, and then go to
Like the contrast shower.
And
Yeah,
I
like
think,
that.
But I think when you switch that fast, you're not really you're not allowing your body to adapt to the challenge of
Just
the new
constantly
environment.
changing your heart
You're
rate.
just like you're right as your body's starting to ramp up to be like, oh shit, it's really fucking cold. I gotta warm up. You just blast it with hot water. You're like, oh fuck, I'm really hot. I gotta cool down.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
more just blood vessel, I suppose.
Yeah,
Plus
where I think like the
stations
sauna and the cold plunge is more of like an elongated, like forcing your body to adapt to this different environment.
So you still think go one to the other, but do a longer period of time,
I-
or only do one day and one the other day?
I think you can go both. Again, I don't have a lot of experience with. Well, I don't have a sauna, but I'll take a really cold shower, but I'll stand in there for 3 or 5 minutes, and then turn it up to Luke-ish warm, and then stand in that for a little bit, and then turn it up to like hot, but then I'll be in there for another 3 to 4 minutes, something like that. But it's not like back and forth. But again, that's not the same thing because it's only a very small portion of my body and my feet that get cold and hot.
I do recall back from my younger days is that for the females out there, that you rinse with cold water, and it helps close your hair shaft, and it makes your hair shinier.
I believe that's true because even Nioxin, that was their thing back in the day.
Yep.
As far as hair product, is it had like a mint because it would cool your scalp,
Cooling, yep, effervescent.
cool your scalp and activate them.
No.
Hey, you learn something new every day.
Yeah,
Whereas
just-
like my
just-
wife takes the shower that will burn the flesh off your body.
Just for the ladies out there
Yeah.
listening.
Um,
I don't know if this will be the next big thing, but what I would like to see the next big thing, kind of just in sports in general, is a better awareness of recovery in general. Like, we used to make a joke that we were going to have an ACL prevention program where it was just a whole bunch of kids coming in after school, laying around, not doing anything. Because now you see kids playing soccer like 13 months out of the year, right? And they play for school, and then they play for their club team, and they're
That's right.
traveling
There's
every
no
weekend, and then they're
off-season.
doing their strength and conditioning, which all of those individually are such great components to improving athleticism in general. But you have to have recovery. And you have people be like, oh, yeah, I recover. Like on my off days, I go out for a 3-mile run because I'm not playing soccer that day.
Is a bear chasing you?
yeah,
That's
it
still-
does
that's
not-
still-
running.
Yeah.
Well,
So that's still
Exactly.
conditioning. I mean, like the old Russians, they used to, if their soccer team, they would have them go play basketball on an off day,
Yeah.
just to work different proprioception of their body.
Yeah.
Right.
Which
And they
that's
didn't
important.
realize they were working out because they're like,
Exactly.
oh, we're just having fun playing
having-
basketball,
Exactly.
playing a game,
and it's
yeah.
not stressful.
There's a treatment that we use. It's called Russian E-stim. Like, it's literally called Russian. That's what it
'Cause
shows
they
up on the
invented it,
screen.
yes.
Because the Russians during the Cold War were trying to figure out how to get their athletes to continue working out even when they were forced to recover. They had to. They were exhausted. And it's a neuromuscular stimulus to increase activation of a muscle. And we know via research that there's no carryover with it. It's just kind of a neuromuscular activation thing. There's no increase in strength. But just that mindset of, like, more is better, I think has just been ingrained. And I
Well,
will
I think CrossFit, not to dog CrossFit, but I think that they created the dick measuring contest. I can go hard
they did
every
help
day.
it,
The
I'll
Yeah,
give
high-level
you that.
athletes did.
I can go
I-
hard every day. Oh, you're not going to be here? I don't give a fuck. I'm going to do 20 more than you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
I personally feel like gymnastics is kind of where it started, because initially you had people who were kind of looking at these gymnasts and saying, oh, this is too much. Like, look what we're doing to these little girls that still look like little girls at like 30 and 40 years old. But instead of gymnastics taking a step back and saying, oh, they practice, 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, you have every other sport saying, well, if gymnastics can get away with it,
We're gonna
Right.
we're going to do that too.
Well, and like kids' bodies, like they will compensate amazingly well.
Yes.
Yeah, their recovery
Fatigue,
is
like,
awesome.
They will compensate until they fucking crash.
Yes.
And now I think when you translate it to sports, that I mean, that's more of like from an EMT paramedic side, like when you're just analyzing a kid who's had a traumatic issue. But like as kids playing sports, that compensation is elongated over years, and now they become adolescents, teenagers, and they lose that ability to compensate, but they try to keep that workload going, and then they slowly deteriorate.
I feel like we see that quite a bit actually with our practice. Is you get that compensation pattern, you get these big injuries, you get a growth spurt in there with puberty, you got a huge recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Plus, you're playing one sport now. A lot of people play one sport all year round. They don't play 3 sports,
It's
and
the
we know
fucking
that.
worst.
Yeah, that's the
But-
worst thing for your body.
For the longest time, my youngest ACL patient was 14. And then I had an 11-year-old. And then a couple of years ago, I had a 9-year-old kid that tore his ACL.
And a small 9-year-old.
Yeah.
not
Doing
a
what?
large-
And
Like what were they?
I was a wrestler. I was doing sprints. Went to, like, wall-to-wall sprints. Went
Yeah.
to plant, pivot, and tore it. And I
Jesus.
didn't tell the parents this, so hopefully they're not listening. But the surgeon and I had plenty of conversations, and the surgeon basically was like, I've never done an ACL repair on a kid this age. I said, I've never done rehab
I
on
mean,
a kid
that's
this
just
age.
got to be like a rubber band at that age.
I
Like,
mean, their
they're
bones
super bouncy.
alone are very flexible. So
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just that mentality. And
Yeah.
a super, super sweet family, super sweet kid. Like, I don't necessarily think that they thought that they were pushing him by any
Yeah.
means. It's just probably one of those things where you're like, well, are we giving these kids enough time to recover, regardless
Yeah.
of what age it is and regardless of what
Right.
sport they're doing?
But I think part of that, you get parents who, especially I've seen a lot with kids that have been trained in our facilities, like their parents live vicariously through them.
100%.
Yeah. Well, and like everyone does it, right? So you see,
See, my parents didn't care.
well, like,
I'm coming to one game a year. Don't fuck it up.
Fortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to play a sports year round when I was a kid. 'Cause
Oh, no,
I
that
grew
was a
up,
small
like-
school. Also,
yeah,
you know,
so
you-
like south of Omaha, like a little small rural area, like basketball had a season, soccer had a
Yep.
season. Like
There was no
everything had
club
its own
sports,
season.
there was
there
no-
was
yeah.
none of that stuff. And so when I coached youth football for probably 15 years, and ultimately got out because the organization that had started out as an organization to like, let's just get kids playing fucking football. Like, we're not going to have select teams. We're not going to have travel teams. Like, we just want everyone in the district to like play football and then go to their schools and play football. And if you don't like it, cool, like that's fine. But football has its season and we're good. And then at like the junior high level, they started extending. And they're like, oh, well, we're going to have a flag season in spring. And I'm like, whatever, that's fine. And then it was, we're going to have a flag season, but we're going to make it like mandatory to have a good pick for your team the next year. And then they added strength conditioning over the summer. And so now that football turned into like what was like not a rec thing, because like we still wanted to have high performers and we wanted to develop good athletes, but it was still more of like, let's just get kids playing sports into this, like, we're going to develop these high level talents and we're going to have travel teams and we're going to go year round. And I'm like, when do they get to be kids and like
Yeah.
get some time off?
Yeah,
Like,
we've taken that away from them.
right, they don't get to do that. And then now kids are still wanting to do other sports, right? Because, you know, not all of their friends play football. Some play basketball. And they're like, well, I'm going to go play basketball with my friends. So now I've got strength conditioning for football in the summer.
Yeah.
And now I got to go play basketball and I got baseball. And it's
Well,
just
the
fucking too
off
much.
season doesn't really exist anymore because
Yeah.
not to dog on soccer, but that's probably one of the more prevalent ones here in the Midwest is that you have, you know, the high school season where club is a little bit quieter, and then you have the training where they're doing indoor season and, you know, they're playing other indoor teams and they're doing strength and conditioning, which again, like, great component for that. But there's no off season. They're always doing something. They're always traveling.
So
and-
you're seeing more wear and tear injuries on
Oh, yeah.
younger kids.
Yeah.
The injuries that we used to see in like the college age population, where you took your 3 and 4 sport athletes and you gave them a scholarship or you had them play a sport, one particular sport in college, they played it year round. We now see those injuries at like 10, 12, 14 years old
Jesus.
because they're playing this sport year round. And maybe, you know, they say, oh, well, I do soccer, but I also play softball or I also play volleyball, but it's such an anecdote to what they're actually playing. And they're still playing 12 months out of the
Yeah.
year for their single sport.
Yeah.
When I think we always talk about strength and conditioning, I think that's a double-edged sword because there's a lot of shitty strength and conditioning coaches out there who don't know what they're doing. And you see, like, I mean, you used to see like Louis Simmons talk about it all the time, all the hamstring injuries in the NFL. He's like, they're all quad dominant people.
Yeah.
You know, all these strength and conditioning coaches, like, we're going to do, you know, old school, we're going to do cleans, we're going to do front
Right.
squats. what about your hamstring work?
Yeah.
And that's your. I mean, hamstrings make you fast. If you want to be fast, you need to have fucking huge hamstrings if you want to be fast.
Those are the coaches or the strength and conditioning coaches that they have one program and they're like, this is a great program.
Well, they're still following Husker
yeah,
Power from like
they're
the 90s.
Yeah.
you
applying
shut
it
your
to
fucking
everyone.
mouth.
Hey, Boyd Epley did a good job. The
Dude.
possible drug use probably helped things then.
Correct.
That's fine. They should put them all on drugs. I think it's great. We'll see who the real athletes are.
Amoxicillin? Or
But no, I think they, because I mean, I look back,
Prophylactically.
I look back being from a small town like you were. I mean, we didn't have a strength and conditioning program. Like, it'd be like, hey, make sure you go to the weight room this summer.
Right.
Yep.
And somebody might show up, but you know what? We had like very few injuries. I mean, if you're going to train somebody, at least don't train them like a butt fuck or just don't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But,
Because
like-
we had like one kid my whole high school career that had a knee surgery.
Yeah.
In,
I mean,
in my high school
there
that I remember, but you said, when you get stronger, you're going to generate more force. You're going to generate more injuries probably in that area. Well, if you don't, I grew up in a small town like you did. We were all just like farm strong kids. We just
Right.
did
they're
shit.
like
You know what I mean?
functional.
Throwing
Yeah,
bales of hay
functional.
running through the creek.
Yeah, you know what I
building
mean?
forts
And then
shit.
we didn't have a strength and conditioning coach that just had us do front squats
Yeah.
every day.
Mark and I share posts, and I would never specifically say like who they are, but there's a couple of high school strength and conditioning coaches here in town that post lifts of like their athletes doing stuff that both Mark and I are like, I would never post that.
Well, and
like I
that's the
would
thing is-
never take
Ouch,
claim to
yeah.
that.
I
You
think
know,
that these
unless it was
schools-
like, watch what happens
Yeah.
sort of video.
And I think these schools that want to have the programs,
You won't believe what
if
happens
you want to
next.
have a program,
Bang.
do it right and let your head strength coach hire more coaches to be with those kids. You can't have one guy with like 30 kids.
No, it doesn't work.
There's also
that
like this huge emphasis on strength and development in like these younger ages, and I'm like,
You can do a lot
You're
of it with
gonna get-
body weight stuff.
right, like you can
Yeah.
just go do stuff.
Well, and
And
I think
They'll get better.
Yeah, you take an 11 or 9 or 11-year-old kid and he's doing body weight, he's doing push-ups. You have him lunge the soccer field, and
Right.
that kid's going to turn into a monster.
I have a soft spot for youth strength and conditioning because I think for so long people were like, you're gonna cripple his skeleton, like we're gonna
You're
have
gonna
That's
Stunt
I was going to
their
say something about that later, but
Oh
like
yeah.
the whole fear of the growth plate thing.
right.
I don't let my kid lift weights, but he plays pee-wee football, and I'm like,
Right. Okay.
yeah.
But it's, even from the very, very beginning, if you go straight, like textbook, here's what strength and conditioning you're supposed to be doing. It's all, especially with youth, it's all emphasis on form. And I just feel like
Right.
maybe it is that CrossFit mentality, but there's just that more is better. And I will say very often, Mark always rolls his eyes, but I'll say, well, sometimes more isn't better. Sometimes more is just more.
Quality is better.
Yeah.
Correct.
Quality over quantity.
I might suck at something, but I look good doing it.
I'd rather look good lose and look bad and win. But no, I think
That is
technique
my
has to.
philosophy.
Technique has to be. That's just like when Matt and I talked on an earlier podcast. Like, if I was a high school strength coach, every one of those kids would box squat. It is the easiest way to teach someone how to squat.
Right.
You can change the height, get them confident with it. You don't need to overload them. Just get their technique right.
But if you look at the
And that's probably the most injured lift.
if you
is
look at
box squatting,
schools,
or
though, like,
squatting.
you can train the strength and conditioning coach, and they might fucking be on top of it, but you have to get everyone else on board with it because they don't have that same scope. So either that guy has to convince everyone else that he knows what he's doing and what he's doing is right to get him to trust, or everyone else has to be on board with like, let's just box squat because it's weird, right? A lot of that stuff is weird. It doesn't seem like it would give you the benefit that you'd be looking for. So it's a slightly bigger picture to try to get that. But I agree, like they need to drop some of that. I don't know. I don't wanna say
The clean and
pompous
press
attitude,
and all
but-
this stuff like the Olympic lifting. You're never going to teach those kids how to do it right. So just give it up.
No, like I had
I-
a buddy who played at Northwest Missouri State, went down there. He was strong, athlete, went down there, and he couldn't do a hang clean until they had progression steps that you had to demonstrate you had the right technique. And I think there were like 5 steps, and you had to like test out with their strength and conditioning coach in order for you to get worked into that program. Otherwise, they had other shit for you to do.
That's 21,000 reps to be proficient in Olympic lifting. Yeah. That's a lot of reps.
I-
When you can emulate it by doing a box jump.
I will
That is a triple extension.
fully admit that the lack of kind of, we'll just say, high school supervision is one of the big reasons that our business was born. Not just like, oh, kids get injured, ha ha ha. But I
Oh,
mean,
all the time,
Mark and I
yeah.
both worked at clinics previously before we opened up our own that we were having to go out and meet kids at like their school weight room. Because I'm like, well, okay, so you can body weight squat, but you're going to tell me that you're going to go back into your high school weight room, regardless of where it is. You're going to be in there with your football team. There's going to be 50 kids in there. There's going to be one coach that's not paying attention to you. Like, I need to see those kids squat before I let them do it. And there wasn't a place that had enough weight in either of our clinics that could do it. And so You
your form doesn't
I'm
go to shit
grateful
until
for
you're.
that, but
Yeah, you're not going to see someone's form break until like 85, 90%.
exactly.
Anybody can make a body weight squat look real good.
But the fact that that was kind of
That's true. But
the
you're broken.
that was the rule and not the exception, is that we're
Yeah.
sending these kids back and we know that there's not going to be supervision on them, then our business was
And
born.
the crazy part is, like, I think it's gotten better over the last 20 years. Like,
I think there's
school-
more options.
There's more options, but I think, like, when we go look back at, like,
Oh, dude, if I
probably
would have had
weighted
the
sports-
opportunities like the kids have now, like if I could have trained at a facility like Omaha Barbell when I was in high school, dude, all of us kids would have been monsters then.
But
Like,
even some of the mentality of
it was
like,
so hard to get
our,
strong then.
Like, coaches were like,
Well, we didn't
No
know what
water
we were
break.
doing.
yeah, we were
Yeah.
just, yeah.
remember coaches like you're tough if you don't drink water during practice, or like you just go through and you do whatever kind of shitty ass form.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's, even though it's still not ideal now, I think it's still better than where it was. Like, there's a little more awareness to
There
it.
is.
Yeah.
But you still have this like ultra competitive attitude for youth sports when it should just be fun, that keeps it from like crossing over into the spot of like, let's just get better at doing this stuff from like a technical standpoint. You'll get stronger, you'll get faster just by being a kid and hitting puberty.
And like I
just,
said, doing the body weight stuff even.
right.
And you know the hard part with the strength and conditioning coach, you see like similar in like even like the personal training stuff like that, is that everybody's like, there's always a magazine they read that contradicts what you said.
Yeah.
So you're always challenging. Even as a strength and conditioning coach, you know, we're doing this. Well, why? Because it works. Well, yeah, but I read this article.
Well, on Instagram.
yeah.
Yeah.
I read this
Fucking
article
Instagram.
from 1979 that they were doing this. I'm not saying some of that stuff doesn't work. I mean, look at like Westside Louis built that whole gym off of following the Russians and the Soviets, you know what I mean? And what they did to basically own the Olympics for years in strength sports. But that is the hardest thing because, oh, well, I was watching I used to do it with like female clients, I was watching The Biggest Loser and I don't get it. She lost like 40 pounds in 2 weeks. And I was like,
She burns
she's also
4,000
like
calories a
800
day.
fucking pounds. Yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's like 1,000-pound sisters walking over here. Like, I mean, these are totally different scenarios. They're locked in a compound and everything is controlled.
Yes.
You're talking about something completely different. And the stress of that would be hard. One of my good friends is a strength and conditioning coach at one of the high schools here, and he knows his shit. But I'm sure he runs into parents that are
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Yeah.
well, why are you doing that? Well, because first of all, your kid can't even walk and chew gum. Let's fucking start a developmental system.
Yeah.
Like, I think going vertical here in Omaha, are they still around? I think they were a good foundation for it to an extent. Some of the stuff, learning kids just like to use their body. They had that reactor and I think the tracer, whatever the thing was called, just to get them awareness of their body. Some of the other stuff I might not have always agreed with, but I think even programs starting like with Matt was saying, it's body weight stuff, but that reactor, they had to watch a screen and move on a dot pad to where it was at without turning around and looking for it. You're trying to set time. I think cool stuff like that too, just to work on your reaction time. There's way better ways to make kids better than by just loading a bunch of weight on them.
Yeah, and I think we run into that in our profession too, where we've got people who come in, they were on WebMD or they're watching a YouTube video or an Instagram video. The
I think I have
knees over
cancer.
toes guys, or
No,
you
you're
got
just
Squat
stupid.
University guys, and they watch a couple videos and they have an idea what they think is wrong with them, but those are generalized videos, and those people are
Right.
making money off of producing content, and that's usually what I say. You have to sensationalize your content if that's your job. Is
Yeah.
your job to fix athletes and build the clinic and fix people, or is your job to make YouTube videos that people want to watch? Those are contradictory things, and they're not the same, and they're not universally true.
I mean, knees over toes and Squat University, they bring up good points, but then they still, both of them, for better or for worse, try to apply the same principles to every single person. And I mean, what works for one person, and I will tell my patients this, what works for what I saw the last patient that had something similar might work for you, and that's what we're going to go with. But then if it doesn't work, I'm not just going to sit there and say like, well, no, this will work.
This is your fault.
That's
Exactly.
why. That's why I tell people
You have to
everybody's
change things up.
Everybody's like a fingerprint.
Exactly,
Everybody is as
yeah.
unique as their fingerprint on how things are
And
going to
you,
work.
you don't program a football player the same way that you program a powerlifter, the same way that you program a sprinter, the same way that you program a marathon runner. And, I think for the longest time, strength and conditioning was kind of looked upon as, oh, it's going to make me bulky, right? Like girls don't want to lift weights because I don't want to get...
And now I'll give CrossFit credit for that. CrossFit did help a lot of that.
Absolutely.
Actually, they gave women a better body image idea
Yeah.
that they're not gonna, it's not gonna make them look bulky, or it's not gonna make them look bad.
But you still, like I run into it. I have a group of gymnasts right now that I am training or doing some kind of mobility and some strength stuff with, that their coach, for better or for worse, whatever his mentality is that, well, no, strengthening will make them too bulky that they won't be mobile enough to do what they need to. And obviously you don't have somebody who is a football player or a lineman sitting there doing the exact same lifting program as a gymnast.
Well, and the mobility, and I know I've referred to like Louis stuff a lot in this one, but like the mobility, that's not your problem necessarily, right? As the go like Louis talks about training sprinters. He goes, I'm not here to run them. I'm not a fucking track coach.
Right.
I'm going to make them stronger. You need to run
Right.
them and teach them how to run faster.
Like, there's no downside to being stronger.
Yeah.
No.
Like the side
Like-
effects
like
of,
Ed said, strength is never a
getting
weakness.
bigger, losing
Correct.
mobility, like some of the byproducts of it, if you're not intentional with your strength gains, like that can get there. Like you can put on fat, you can get slower, right? Some of that stuff might come along, but like if you can get stronger and more efficient without compromising that stuff,
Well, look at that.
then that's the fucking golden
Look
ticket.
at Juji, that Juji Mufu. That dude proves
He's an
everybody
alien.
wrong.
Yeah.
But but he proves everybody wrong.
fucking
That guy
alien.
gets bigger and more jacked all the time, and is
he's
still
super athletic.
super athletic and flexible. I mean, the guy does the splits on the chairs, holding
See,
weight.
now, like he's the definition of mobility.
That's what I'm saying.
High
Absolutely.
flexibility in action.
And now, but his thing is, as he got bigger, he kept his mobility and flexibility routine the same. I think the problem is people start doing one thing and they focus solely like tunnel vision on that.
Powerlifting.
Yeah.
They do that. But see, now I go the other way. And actually, this is a question for you guys. You know, I see people here all the time, and they'll be warming up for like 45 minutes to an hour just to start training. Now, where does it become too much of a warm up? You know what I mean? Like, is there such a thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
Define that.
I mean, I think if you have to have 45-minute warm up in order to squat, then you're probably
too much in your head.
You're missing something.
Do you think it's too much in your head at that point? You were just like, if I don't do this, I'm gonna get hurt.
I mean, there's probably some for some people, yeah.
If you've got 30 years of heavy lifting and lots of injuries, maybe you got a case for it. But if you're just starting out and you're 25 or you're 21, your 45-minute workout is going to make you tired. If you're doing hip circles to exhaustion and then you're going to go squat, well, guess what? Your external rotators are already just like blown up. You can't stabilize at all. So I think it just depends where you are. But yeah, there's a lot of people who will overdo. People overdo everything. Obviously,
We were just talking about this like an hour ago with someone outside here, that you always have to pick what your priority is, regardless if you're talking about prioritizing what sport you're in, if you are a multi-sport athlete, or if you're a triathlete that wants to add in, you know, some strength and conditioning, or a powerlifter that wants to improve their bench. Like, you always have to pick what your priority is, and then everything else filters down in slots after that. So if your priority is mobility and you don't care that you spend 45 minutes doing hip circles and that's going to negatively affect your ability to squat, then choose your choice. You know, if your priority is, hey, I want to squat, you might have to do some work when you're not squatting in order to
Like almost a
make
whole
it to
off
the
day.
point
Yeah, so
that,
like
yeah,
a mobility
make it to the point
day.
that you don't have to have that 45-minute work.
Because I always tell people like the analogy, like I look at like your energy / calories. It's like a glass of water, and there's only so much in there. And that's why they always say, you know, do the most neuromuscular challenging exercise first. Because that is going to take the most demand from your body. And we all know the more advanced you get in lifting, the more energy it takes for you to complete a lift, right? Because of what you're doing. And so I always use that. I'm like, if you want to waste half your glass of water on fucking mobility, when you only maybe need to waste like an eighth of it, you know what I mean? I think you only have so much to deal with, and then you're out and you're
Yeah.
done.
I think you got to be really careful. If you're really trying to gain mobility before you work out, that's really not the idea. Dynamic stretching is kind of something you do to gain performance and motion before your exercise. But if you want to really gain mobility in your actual life, that should be a separate exercise or a separate
Right.
day or a separate
Oh, yeah.
workout. That's not something you're like, oh, I'm going to like really work on mobility and then I'm going to go squat. Well, I mean,
I think you hit on it at the beginning. Like if you're not doing that, like that's going to prohibit your performance.
correct.
Right.
Right? You do that enough to kind of like, all right, I've been sitting at a fucking desk for 8 hours today,
Yeah.
fucking eating sandwiches. I need to move a little bit before I start putting weight on my back and get my butthole smashed.
And
to
that's
the
why I
ground.
think, and that's why I think you just do it like you just do the movement itself.
Right.
And like Claire said, to prioritize, like we all know Justin Groffs. Justin is the most immobile person until you put him in a powerlifting position.
It's
and it's like
beautiful.
poetry in motion. Like that guy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you put him in a wide sumo stance to deadlift, and that guy will get in a position that 99% of other people cannot get into.
Yeah.
But you ask Justin to bend over and pick something up off the floor, and it is like a life-altering event for him.
He pulls out his little grabber arm. He's like,
Yeah, but you know,
Got it.
but like you said, and Justin was one of the guys who is a world record holder. He wanted to be the best in the world, and he put his focus into, I'm going to be the best
Yeah.
powerlifter in the world. And his body proved the point.
Yeah. We had some floor work done at our clinic. Nicest man ever. Came in and had to kind of restretch our rubberized flooring. Could not move for poop. I mean, just like knees
You can
flat.
say- you can say
Up
shit
and
if you want
standing.
to.
Yeah, this
Okay,
guy's
couldn't
60
move for
years
shit,
old.
right? Like, obviously had been doing flooring for the better part of his life. Couldn't stand upright. You put him on the floor, and that man just like scrambled around like a crab on the beach.
Yeah,
I
he
mean,
moved better
he
than we
was,
did.
I couldn't move like that. But the minute he stood up,
All hunched
oh,
over,
yeah,
looked
all in
terrible,
spot.
very
Like,
uncomfortable
that's-
standing
that was
up.
his
It's the old-
mobility.
It's the old jack of all
familiarity.
trades and master of none, or you've mastered one.
Yep.
Yeah,
You're never going to be
No.
great at everything.
you cannot be.
No, that's
know-
where most of us fall short in that off stuff. Like Mark had mentioned, like you're either gonna lift that day or you're gonna get mobile that day. Like you can't do both.
No, totally
But
separate.
like most of us, myself included, we're not gonna put in the time for that mobility day because it's not sexy. Like it's not cool. It sucks because it's like
Well, and a lot of times,
20 minutes.
Like, I'm
laying
just
your
limited
floor
on
in the
time.
base.
Yeah.
Right. It's like time, but even if you try to accumulate 10 minutes a day in, some kind of like squat position where you're just trying to sit on your heels just to open stuff up, like,
That's hard.
oh, dude, my Achilles are gonna snap.
Well, I mean, to go full circle, though, I think that's where some of those tools, like a So Right or an AccuMobility ball, like there is a time and a place for that. I mean, we have a So Right that sits next to our bed. It's not the coolest thing ever. It doesn't go with our aesthetic.
It's a very
at home.
awkward place for it.
I was
though.
like, what do you guys?
Yeah, where's this going?
There's one on each side now.
Yeah.
That doesn't change the perception.
We keep the fires burning. But nevertheless, I mean, that's something that, am I going to probably scroll through social media for a couple minutes before I go to bed? Yeah, I do. But I also lay on the So Right because it's just kind of one of those things that, well, okay, if I'm going to be doing this anyway, I may as
Yeah.
well do something beneficial. I'm not going to go downstairs and probably, smash something with a barbell at, let's be honest, like 8:50 at night before I go to bed.
Ooh, you're up late.
And it actually
Yeah.
that kind of leads into
on a Friday.
that kind of leads into one too. You say next to your bed you have it, and I think a lot of people I've talked to, like using the crossballs or a softball or a baseball, and I think using like your bed as an example is you can do progressions of things. I think people get very nervous about like, I don't want to put a baseball. That's like really hard and it's going to hurt. You can do different progressions of things.
Yeah.
Like you can put it on carpet. You could put it on your bed
Yeah.
and do it so it's not as aggressive. And the better you get,
Yeah.
then you get on a harder surface, get into a smaller, like a golf ball, more pinpoint. But I think that's a lot of things people too. They just they see a lacrosse ball and they're like,
Too much.
that's like
Yeah, I
aggressive.
can't do
But
that.
yeah, put it on something soft to absorb some of it. And I think that's also, I think people
That-
get like a negative perception of what it's going to do.
Yeah, that
People are
might
scared
be
of
our $1
pain.
million idea right there. Is a line of like mobility
A
things
plush
that are
line?
aesthetically
Plush mobility?
Yes, that are aesthetically pleasing. They're all in neutrals.
You know what else I
Soft
think is?
grays and beiges.
You know what else is I think is a great thing people overlook? Stretching in the shower because you're already
Oh,
warm.
yeah.
Just don't drown yourself.
And that,
Yeah.
and I actually
Yeah,
do that.
just now.
I do.
I
that
do.
every
The
day.
the
guys
bend
must
over,
have,
touch
like-
your toe stretch in the shower is like one of the.
Do you guys
Plus
have,
your
like,
butthole's super
full-size
clean.
shower?
Yes,
Yeah.
and then you.
Yeah, we don't live in a 1987 house.
64. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's got
I-
the
I-
vibrating bed
I
still.
struggle to fucking turn around without touching the walls in that thing.
Oh, we have some space.
But no, the bend over, like the bend over, touch your toe stretch in the shower. Just make sure
Oh,
it
yeah.
doesn't. Your
When-
butthole's super clean, but water goes in your nose, so you got to really work that angle right.
We will. I couldn't speak to the butthole thing, but I will tell patients
So you
that
have a
all the
dirty
time.
butthole?
No.
Oh, okay.
no,
Well, I'm just
I'm a-
asking. I mean,
I am a lady. I will tell patients that when they ask, "Hey, should I do heat or ice?" I say, "Hey, quick and dirty test. What's it feel like before the shower? What's it feel like after the shower? If it feels better after a shower, you've increased blood flow to muscles. You're probably more mobile, and things have relaxed. Even with something as generic as back pain, what does it feel better after you're in the shower for 5 minutes? Even if you're just sitting there letting the water like splash all over your fat, which is my morning, but." That I mean, if it feels better when you expose heat to it, then it's probably some sort of muscular issue, and that's great that heat makes it feel better. Go with that.
what do you think about for a big invention, a rumble roller, foam roller that's actually ice? So you find a pivot, you find a point, or any of it, or not even a rumble roller. Take your AccuMobility, but you make it like ice.
Don't they? I think Hyperice has
So-
one of those like. They have
We're
like
not
a
selling for
ball.
Mark Bell here, so you just calm down on that.
Did he do
I
Hyperice?
mean,
I think he bought Pyro, or no, he
People-
bought the sleeve.
I mean, people will like something new.
yeah, and people love.
But
I'm,
then you're
I'm
getting
sure
that,
there's
then you're getting the
other
cold therapy with the pressure.
like game readies have been around forever, right? Like
Let's see, I
the
want to walk around in a game ready suit.
What's
This is
game
so
ready?
nice.
Is that the
it's the box that you have to put like ice water in,
Like
and
a
then it's a
compression
compressive
with
sleeve, and it's
ice?
air pressure
Oh,
plus
I was thinking
cold.
the when you
It'll,
put your
like,
legs in
press-
it, it does it.
It'll like press in and then kind of
Yeah.
relax and press in. And
And I mean that's a combination of things. That's cold exposure
Yeah.
plus compression plus probably some vasodilation and constriction, but I mean they're like $3,500.
And they
Yeah, we need to
always
make one-
And they leak.
They leak.
We need to make one for poor people. I could sell $1 million $1 items before I can sell a
Yeah.
$1 million item.
Just buy boxes of those
true.
cold packs and some Ace bandages.
Yeah, right.
Look at this package deal we got.
Yeah, $47.
Just a Velcro strap. It's tight. It's not. It's tight. It's not.
Yeah. What kind of compliance rate do you see with patients? Like, how big of that does it affect, like, you working with people?
I mean, our patients are good. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, I mean, your patients are
but
probably golden. Yeah.
yeah.
Compared to the average population, our patients that are really motivated are fairly compliant. I would say at 80%.
Yeah.
Until they feel like they've gotten better.
Until
even
they
though
hit
they're
that
not
like
alwa-
80, 85%,
they're not-
and then
yeah,
they're like, I'm good.
I'm
It's like
good.
antibiotics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're almost there, but you got to finish. You got
Yeah.
to finish the whole series. So
Yeah.
I think that's the thing is we get a lot of people who are extremely compliant, which is fantastic. So we don't have to see people
That's awesome.
as much or as long as maybe a traditional clinic, but because of that, you also get people pushing the envelope. We have extreme athletes all the time coming into there, and that personality type is go, go, go,
Like,
red line,
when
red
can I
line,
go?
red
Am I
line.
good? Am I
I
good?
want to
Am I
go.
good? Am I
Yeah,
good?
it's like, well, we got to step this up,
Yeah.
gradually over time.
But I think part of that too, and I don't know where all of your listeners come from, but if they're not from Nebraska, Nebraska is what we consider a direct access state for physical therapy. So you don't need a script, you don't need a referral. So we have plenty of patients that are like, I think I'm good, right? Like I'm going to go out, I'm going to try this on my own, I'm going to go to practice, or I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to test things out, I'm going to go run this race. And it's not a big to do to come back to us, which I think is always good when it comes to the athletic population, is having people who kind of understand that mindset and that mentality, that it's not something like, oh, well, if I want to go back to see Mark and Claire, I have to go to my primary care doc, I have to have them write a script. But that's not true in a lot of places. And that's also not necessarily common knowledge for people. And so they kind of say, well, okay, I'm good enough, and maybe I like sit here at this 80% of improvement and I kind of plateau, but I don't want to go through the whole thing to get back to seeing somebody. And so they just sit there and live with that 80% improvement or that 20-25% of dysfunction, which is frustrating, but I do my part to educate the masses.
Where do you guys want to see core the next 5 to 10 years? Core physical therapy for anybody who missed the first part.
Ooh, I don't know. I want to work a little bit less.
I mean, because how long you guys been in business?
God, 8 years.
Yeah, we opened up
I was
in
gonna say, we were all
December of
kinda-
15.
Similar.
Us and you guys were about the same, so we've kind of got to watch each other kind of grow along the way.
I mean, I enjoy like actually working, so I don't necessarily have any designs to retire as like just purely a business owner.
No,
I
I like doing what we do.
Yeah.
I don't think,
Yeah.
like me and Matt were talking yesterday, I don't think any of us, like at least people that I hang out with, will probably ever retire.
Yeah. I think
I think I'd just be bored.
I
real
think
bored.
just in general, everybody wants to work with athletes, right? Like it's cool, it's sexy, it's
It is, but elders pay the bills.
yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, I will joke a lot that my dad is one of my perfect patients in the sense that he's 75 years old, soon to be 76, and he runs every day. So you take him to a traditional PT clinic and they're like, well, sir, you probably have some knee arthritis and might need a knee replacement. But, you know, our goal is to get you to walk from room A to room B. And that's all you need to do right now as a retired old man. My dad still wants to run. Like that's maybe the status quo, but that's not good enough for him. So it doesn't matter age or activity level. Like we want to be able to help people, as cliche as it sounds, do what they want to be able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's different forms of being athletic. I mean, athletic at 70 and athletic at 17 are totally different, but you can be an athlete at every age or
Yeah.
any age.
So
it's just a different course of action.
I guess professionally, I would love to see core kind of be more and more just grow as kind of a one location. Hey, here's where you go if you're serious about this.
That's how I
you
say.
know?
I'd
Like,
rather have
it's-
one kick-ass location than multiple
Yeah.
shitty locations.
There are patients that I love that they have found their way to us, but there's patients that are like, well, you know, I went to a chain clinic and my kid had ACL surgery and they did okay, but they can't get back to sports. But the PT there discharged them because they were like, oh, you're fine. Like you run like shit. You can't jump for anything. Like you have total fear avoidance. You're not landing on that leg. That's great that they found their way to us. But at some point, even as much as I love my job and my profession, like there are some crappy people in our profession that are like, well, I don't know what the F I'm doing, but
It's like they
It's-
look in the back of the book and they're like, what's the definition of bare minimum?
I don't know what
Yeah.
I'm doing,
Fair.
but get the
Correct.
needles.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah.
Get the needles. I don't know how this is going to go.
Here's this protocol that I'm supposed to do, and I'm doing a disservice to these patients that are paying me good money, right? Like healthcare is expensive nowadays. So I think professionally before I get on my soapbox with that. I would just love core to just grow and get really, really good quality therapists that just continue to embody, I think, what Mark and I and all of us kind of
Your mission, your kind
Yeah.
of what
But-
standard you guys have.
and have people sort of recognize that, like, hey, you can't be everything to everyone. Like, do one thing, do it well. Our slogan is, this is who we are, this is what we do. Like, this is what our business is.
This is what we do.
We're core physical therapy.
And with that, like, I think we covered a lot of real nifty things today. Matt, you got anything about being broken? Are you good?
No, I'm good. I got tons of other funny stories, but we'll keep those.
And Mark does put up some Instagram videos, helpful videos at Core. Is it Core Omaha? Core Physical Therapy. Core Omaha. Well, no, but on what's your Instagram?
Core Omaha.
You can check them out on Core Omaha. They'll put up some videos. If you're in the Omaha area, they are located on 173rd and Center.
76.
76th and
Yep.
Center.
By Chick-fil-A.
We're right by Chick-fil-A and
Every-
Chipotle.
everybody
They're building
knows where
Chick-fil-A in Huhat.
Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A is the landmark.
Yeah.
Everybody knows
Everyone
where
knows
it is.
So when they're usually at all of our meets, they'll be at the Ed Cohen meet.
Yep.
Carol will be competing. Mark will be here hanging out.
Yeah.
They've actually treated Ed a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can say, like, I would recommend people going there because, like, they do know athletes. Like, they understand the expectation of, like, when you're hurt and you want to get back to doing something, it's like, all right, well, what do you want to do? Well, I'd like to compete again. They're like, all right, well, cool. Here's all the shit we got to do. It's going to be shitty and it's going to be sucky, but here's what we can do. Here's what you have to do. Stick to the path and you'll get there, and it works.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Anything else you guys want to add?
I don't think so.
I mean, if you're in the area, then come to the Ed Cohen meet.
Yeah. Come to the Ed Cohen meet. If you're in the area and you get fucked up,
Yeah.
go to their place. All right, guys. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate everybody for listening. See you guys.